Welcome back to Forward Progress, your source for NFL betting, powered by the Hammer Betting Network and Pinnacle Sportsbooks. As a reminder, we're using prices from Pinnacle Sportsbook. It's the world's sharpest sportsbook and available to bettors in Ontario. Find out what professional bettors have known for decades. Pinnacle is where the best bettors play. Must be 19 plus in Ontario. Please play responsibly. I'm G-Stack George. I'm your host today, but I'm joined by three experts who will better inform you on the NFC West. I'm joined by Fabian Sommer, Eric Eager, and Geoff Fienberg. Thanks for joining me, guys.
No problem, George.
All
Yes,
right, I
let's
want to
go.
start with San Francisco, who is the chalk favorite to win the division here. There's still a question about Brock Purdy's health to start the year, but after Shanahan proved he could make it work with three different quarterbacks last year, is the injury not as concerning as it would be for any other team? Eric, we'll start with you.
No, I think Purdy. So an interesting story is like Brock Purdy went to Iowa State. He was like coached in the offseason by Sage Rosenfeld as a former Iowa State quarterback. Sage played for Kyle Shanahan in Houston, like specifically coached him to coach that to play that offense. So he sort of knew the answers to the test. And I think Purdy to me is like the one, like the leak in the whole in this whole quarterback discussion about Shanahan, because when you actually look at the Niners, since 2015, they've either won won enough to get to the NFC title game, or they lost 10 or more games. And the years they lost 10 or more games, it was bad coaching or it was quarterback injuries. Garoppolo in 18, Garoppolo in 20. Like they've cratered when their quarterback has gotten hurt. And that is even when guys like Nick Mullins can get 8 yards per pass attempt. CJ Beathard has put up decent efficiency numbers. Purdy was the one guy that kind of changed the way that we look at it. But now Purdy's the one that's hurt, right? And so now we're depending upon guys like Darnold and guys like Trey Lance to do what Purdy did. And I just don't know if they're able to replicate that.
All right, Suma, it feels like this might be the first year where there's legitimate questions on the O-line for the 49ers. Do you agree with that sentiment?
Yes, I do. When you look at it, like left guard Aaron Banks left a lot to be desired last year in his rookie season. Then we don't really know how exactly everything will shake out, but I mean, if it's Colton McKivitz at right tackle, not a great look. Downgrade from Mike McGlinchey, Jake Brendel, and John Feliciano might battle for the center spot. Then we have Spencer Burford at right guard potentially, or maybe if John Feliciano will not be center, he will play guard again. Don't know how it will shake out, but it's certainly a downgrade from last year, in my opinion. So everything outside of left tackle Trent Williams might be a question mark. But I also think that if there's an offense where I might not be overly concerned with the offensive line, it's probably Kyle Shanahan with that group of playmakers. Brock Purdy, don't know what to expect if he starts week one. Don't know whether he can realistically be at 100%. I think it would usually hurt a quarterback if he cannot throw for several months during the off season. But I actually also would not be surprised if they plug in Sam Darnold and he plays decently well and averages a decent EPA per play in that offense.
All right. Geoff, San Francisco is minus 182 to win the division. Do you have any interest in them at that price?
At that price, I do not. I could see it going in the way where they are as dominant as they have been, but I just, with the questions that still exist at quarterback, I very much believe in San Francisco. I don't want to bet them to win that. Their schedule sets up quite nice. They're like favored by 3 or more points in, I think, over 10 games, and I could see them clearing that number. But at that sort of odd, I'm not willing to invest in it with the quarterback questions.
Eric, you tweeted about what price they are at, and you had replies like, San Fran minus 182. That's a big price, and you said, yeah, but it's a 2-team division. Is that price completely reflective of we don't believe there's many contenders in this division?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be a common theme throughout this series of shows, but like you have to look at the motivation of teams like the Rams, who like they're not they don't have specialists on their roster until, like they're, the Rams are going to go. I think the Rams are going to go into the season and they're going to say, let's see how far Stafford and Kupp can take us. And as soon as those wheels come off, it's over. They're going to finally, try to play for draft picks and that kind of thing, and sell off players and that kind of thing. And when you look at Arizona is like in a prime position to have the first and second pick next year if things go right for them. And so I don't know if they want to screw it up either, especially with the injury at quarterback. So I look at Arizona, and Arizona also has a new regime, and so if they don't play well in year one, it's not going to get anybody fired. So I think like it is really Seattle. And I think people are looking at Seattle more like how much of last year was smoke and mirrors with Geno Smith, especially because Geno faded at the end, and they're piling all that implied probability on the Niners, which I think is reasonable. I just think it's probably a little too much at this point.
All right, let's move on to Seattle. The Seahawks have been bet all offseason. They started off plus 500 to win the division behind the Rams. That's no longer the case. They are now plus 256 to win the division. Suma, is there still any value left at this number, or has the number been bet into place?
I would probably rather bet the Seahawks at plus 256 than the Niners at minus 182. I think that the Seahawks, yes, we have some reservations about Geno Smith, but overall, he also played a very decent season, and they are entering the season with an improved offense, at least in my books. That offensive line ranked 20th in pass blocking grade last year, I think 18th in run blocking grade. And we need to consider that both tackles were rookies, and they both played reasonably well, and they are now entering year two, which where we should expect some kind of improvement. So I would expect that offensive line to perform even better than last year. And you also have the potential of having a top 5 receiving duo with Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, and Jackson Smith and Jigba probably being that plug and play slot guy. And being interchangeable with Tyler Lockett in that offense. And I also like the scheme that they were running last year. They also have some explosiveness at running back. So I would not be surprised if the Seahawks are going to be one of the better offenses in the NFC next year. And they also improved a little bit on the defensive line. I still have some reservations about their D-line, but I still think Bobby Wagner still played very well at age 34 last year. And even having that brain in the middle of your defense will probably improve that front seven. Jamal Adams comes back, which might also be a boost to that run defense. And they also have some upside at cornerback now with Devon Witherspoon being the 5th pick overall. Tariq Rune played very well last year. And they also have some depth at safety with Julian Love. So all in all, I kind of like the Seahawks kind of a little bit in the NFC, because in the AFC, they would probably not be a strong playoff contender, but in the NFC, in that team picture, I really like them a lot. And at the current division price, I would rather lean towards the Seahawks than to the Niners.
All right, Geoff, I talked about how Seattle went from third in the division at the start of the offseason to the clear-cut number 2. Do you believe that's a fair assessment, that Seattle is without a doubt the number 2 team in this division?
Yeah, absolutely. And it'd be redundant, honestly, for me to say anything else in terms of Eric breaking it down as the 2-team division. And, Fabian's great, sort of roster breakdown. Another great draft class there, a lot to build on, 3 great receivers. I'm kind of bullish with Seattle, but there's another market that we'll get to at the end that I could be attracted when it comes to the Seahawks.
All right, Eric, wide range of outcomes. We talk about teams like this. What's a more likely scenario for Seattle? And this is all obviously a Geno Smith question, that they reach the upper level of their range of outcomes and become one of the 3 best teams in the NFC, or Geno Smith progresses and they are a below average team. What do you think is a more likely scenario?
I think it's more likely that they're very good. When they have about an average strength of schedule, which is, fairly good after coming off a playoff performance. I think Geno, he had the best completion percentage over expected of any quarterback in the league, which I know that doesn't necessarily correlate with offensive success, but it has some signal as to what kind of quarterback he is. And I don't think that's just going to go away. To me, the big thing is when you look at what they're going to have to do defensively, yeah, they don't have a great pass rush from the front four. Suma talked about Jamal Adams. I look at their corners are all man guys. Kobe Bryant, Witherspoon, as well as Tarek Woolen. Like they're going to play man coverage, and Jamal Adams is going to be their best pass rusher. Like that's the ultimate thing for them. And when you look at statistically how defensive perform, man coverage just exacerbates the difference between you and the other team. So if you're better than them, it clamps them down even further. If you're worse than them, it widens that distribution. And when I look at their schedule, I'm not all that scared of the other quarterbacks that they're facing. And so I think that they have an opportunity to fool us, because when the playoffs come, then the best quarterbacks end up roasting those teams. But I think in the regular season, they're going to have some real success.
Sure. Geoff, there's this dynamic in betting where when one side gets pounded, the pendulum often swings just a little bit too much to the other side. Is there any chance that has happened with the Rams, or are you buying the whole downward trend?
I think Eric kind of laid it out. They're going into the season. They've got those horses. The horses are healthy. If Matt Stafford is upright, they can be fine. They can be competitive. But there seems to be a new wherewithal there. They're certainly not going to dip into whatever draft capital they have left to fix something. They're not, star expletives anymore. They realize their position in this league. And if they break down, if the offensive line gets hurt again and Stafford can't be upright and Cooper Kupp gets hurt, there's already rumblings that they have gone to Aaron Donald in a way to maybe even get that off the books at the trade deadline. So I totally agree with Eric's assessment that they'll ride that thing into the wall. But once it crashes, they're going to sell off for parts.
All right. Suma, I'm going to give you one scenario that maybe is unlikely, but Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, and Aaron Donald are healthy the entire year. What's the ceiling for that Rams team with those three staying healthy?
To make the playoffs, I would guess. I mean, there's a scenario, which is not very likely, but there's a scenario, if all those guys stay healthy, that the Rams are going to have the third best quarterback in the NFC, a dominant wide receiver one who might go nuclear, a serviceable offensive line, and a very good head coach offensive coordinator combo with Mike LaFleur. And I think if everything comes together, they might have a ceiling that is a wild card spot in a weak NFC, but it's also a very fragile projection, like Eric has mentioned.
All right, let's talk about the Cardinals. They made sweeping changes to the coaching staff. They bring in a guy, Jonathan Gannon, as head coach who's never done the job, which isn't not uncommon. They also bring in an offensive coordinator, Drew Petzing, who has never called an offense. And they bring in Nick Rallis, a defensive coordinator who has never called the plays defensively. Eric, how often does that happen and it work, where all three guys are completely finding a new job that they've never done before?
It's not frequent. It's funny because when Gannon took over in Philly, they didn't have that much talent defensively, and everybody gave him a lot of flack because he wasn't running stunts, he wasn't disguising coverages, he wasn't blitzing, he wasn't doing all those things. And that defense became good when they had talent. Now he's back to another team where there's almost no talent defensively. I think what they're going to try to do is play a lot of zone and play a lot of safe stuff, and that's going to get the feet wet of both of these coordinators, because you're going to basically be having fewer plays on the offensive side of the ball, which is good, obviously, because as we know from betting, right, if you don't have an edge, the more you bet, the worse it gets. And that's kind of, I think, that what they're going to try to do here. I think they're going to try to muck up games. They're going to try to have low scoring, low snap count games because of what you just said, because there's almost no experience in running a team again. And, to the point of that, and then also running plays on both sides of the ball.
All right. Suma, when you're creating like season-long projections and looking at a team's forecast, it's very hard to do when there's one gigantic unknown, and that's Kyler Murray's health. What range of weeks are you putting him back at, and how do you project the team's whole season outlook when you really don't know what's going to happen at quarterback for them?
I think it's very tough because even if Kyler Murray is ready to go at some point, let's say in like mid October or late October, the season could already be over, and then the question becomes whether they they really want to throw Kyler Murray in there coming off that ACL, because it would be in that scenario a wasted season already. So why throw in your quarterback who's just coming off that ACL? And what I also found interesting, when I look at the Cardinals a few weeks ago, there might be a chance that Clayton Tune is going to start at quarterback in week one. And to be
Yeah,
honest, I had to Google that guy.
I remember him just from the combine. He actually had a cannon. I never watched him in college, but he had a live arm during it. Okay, if they're 1-8, Jeff, and Kyler Murray says I'm ready to go, is there any world where they say no, we don't want or risk you getting re-injured, but really it could just be hey, we don't want to screw up this Caleb Williams thing?
Uh,
Is it possible Kyler Murray's played his last snap as an Arizona Cardinal?
yeah. I think that's more than possible. That is certainly the way the wind is blowing. I don't think this new regime will let Kyler Murray sort of ruin the master plan. And they're doing exactly what, I mean, it could be a really painful year for Cardinal fans, but this is, if you're a fan of a team, I think they're going to go about this exactly as you would want, especially staring down that Caleb Williams Drake May year, having that extra pick. The players never tank. We know that in football. We've Houston, Miami. You could think of a couple scenarios where huge favorites to be the first overall pick didn't get that pick. And maybe Arizona is another example of a team that finds way more than we're expecting. But it does seem like from the coaching staff and the front office, the roster, the players they put on the field will make that as hard as humanly possible.
You know the Twitter account Freezing Cold Takes, and it always brings back things people say. I remember the Jonathan Gannon video where he arrives at the Arizona facility and he's shaking everybody's hands, and he's talking to Kyler Murray, and he goes, "Of course I'm coming here. How many teams can you walk in and have a franchise guy?" And if they end up never playing him and trading him and moving on to the next era, I believe that video will get circulated again. All right, there's a thing where a narrative gets out of control or it's very well known, and it's going to be hard to find anybody wanting to plug their nose and back the Arizona Cardinals on a week to week basis. They're sitting at +6 week one against Washington. Is anybody here think they're capable of plugging their nose and maybe getting on the Arizona bandwagon early in the season?
That game is
Depends.
Arizona or bust if you're going to bet it, right? You're Arizona or not betting it at all. Like we've seen, I mean, I remember the Hurricane Katrina Saints winning their first game of that season. Like there are plenty of teams. The 2001 Panthers won their first game, lost their next 15. The Jaguars 2 years ago won their first
Chicago
game.
last year.
Bears.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like if you're laying 6 with Sam Howell, like I have nothing but prayers for you.
Yeah, you like that might be a game where you bet all the alternates because the range of outcomes of both teams are like that wide. Let's take a look at win totals for this division. Right now, San Francisco's at 11.5 wins. Over is +147, under -175. Seattle is 8.5 wins, over -157, under +132. The Rams are 6.5 wins, over -101, under -117. Arizona's 4.5 wins, over is -114, under is -104. And the Super Bowl odds for every team is San Francisco's +966, Seattle +2941, the Rams +8631, and Arizona +14,779. Let's talk about regular season win total. If you had to make a bet, Zuma, what would be your bet here?
My bet would be Seattle over 8.5 wins, even at -157. It's just that the Seahawks offense has so many good, predictive, stable parts. Like Geno Smith, to be really bad in this conference, he would have to show a really heavy decline. I think their O line is going to improve. I like their OC. I like their receiving group. I think that the offense is or should be really good enough to compete for the playoffs again. And their schedule, like Eric has said, is also not the toughest in the league. So getting over 8.5 with that offense seems very reasonable.
Geoff, do you have the same one, or do you have something else you're looking at?
Well, I totally agree with that. And like I've mentioned in other shows, that I'll be looking for an alternate over there. And to stay on my alternate path, I think it is attractive what that number is for the 4.5 Arizona under. But maybe, as Eric mentioned, maybe you wait that out. You let them win early. That always seems to be the case. Then maybe you can jump on. But if you truly do believe that Arizona has this plan and they're going to stick to it over hell or high water, I would be looking at alt unders on Arizona because they're not getting the first overall pick at 4.5.
So
Like,
alt to like 2.5.
I'm just saying, if you truly believe in it, you could potentially look to alt unders. The schedule isn't easy. They play the AFC North, which is certainly from top to bottom extremely consistent, and the and the NFC East is their crossover. So they didn't catch like the AFC South or something to give them a couple cakewalks. Yeah, if you truly believe in that, you should be more bullish than the 4.5.
All right, Eric, what about you? What win total is standing out to you?
Yeah, I do like Seattle at their price, but I'll just leave it. I'll say Arizona under 4.5 minus 104 if those are the options for us, just because I do think that's a cinch. I just don't see them playing Murray, because there's another part of like the Murray thing is like this is a Kyler Murray cheap season. And so like the subsequent years have a ton of guarantees for injuries and everything. So there's also a ton of incentive for them never to play him contractually as well.
Sure. Let's talk about. I didn't write this question down, and we're gonna ignore the betting market for one quick second. If they do get that first overall pick and Caleb Williams is available, do you think Kyler Murray's trade market will be gigantic? There will be multiple suitors.
I think he'll get a first round pick just because of age, and again, a lot of the money, I have to look at the contract, but I think a lot of the money has already been paid by Arizona. And the thing about trades is that bonus money stays with the trading team. Other money goes with the P5 and the roster bonuses, all that go with it. So he might be actually a relatively cheap bargain contractually, which will which will raise the compensation that the Arizona Cardinals can get in a trade, much like it would have happened if DeAndre Hopkins still had any juice left.
All right. And what about Super Bowl odds? Does anybody like any of those prices for any of the teams in this division? No buyers?
If you believe
Not
in the
really.
Seattle ceiling, but that would just be one that you're like, I don't even want to say getting out of, but that you would like look to chase off of in the playoffs in some ways, but that's not really my style. I'd be a ride or die guy anyway, and I do not believe that in the end Seattle is Super Bowl worthy.
All right, Geoff, you flagged me via email. You said you've got an angle on an awards market. Which one were you looking at?
Okay, so we've discussed it in previous shows, the coach of the year market, and I know too, like sharps, like Eric and Fabian, the narrative street that comes along with these are not like really something they like to, because of narrative street, they're harder to bet into. And outside of comeback player of the year, this coach of the year market is so narrative street heavy. I don't feel like they ever get it right in the preseason market, but there are two coaches here that I look at. Pete Carroll, I've seen flirting around 25-1. That is one where, you meant that he does have that mid-level quarterback. It would almost be we are sorry for like shitting on you so hard 2 years ago, that if they actually came through and won this division, and he has totally turned it around and fixed it, but got it to that point, I think there could be a lot of equity there. And like if Sam Darnold has to play games and the 49ers do what they do, this Kyle Shanahan 28-1 to me is insane. They're like his disciples, like McDaniels and D'Amico are like half his odds. And I get why, because it's the expectations of that team, but he could almost win this thing as maybe could have won it for 3 straight years. We never give it to you. If Kyle Shanahan does it again, no quarterback will get credit in an MVP market or anything. He will get all that credit. I like Shanahan and Pete Carroll.
I just couldn't believe, with 3 quarterbacks last year and getting to 13 wins that he didn't win the award. I still think the wrong guy won the award. Zuma, do you have any player markets, coaching markets that you're looking at here?
No, I'm honest. I'm not looking at anything for this division right now.
Eric, what about you?
Yeah, I think you do have to. I do like the coach of the year markets for sure. I also think that you could look at, for example, Gino to lead the league in passing yards. The only leak there is Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker, but they showed a propensity to throw the ball a lot. So there could be an opportunity there. But yeah, I don't think that they don't have that premier player on defense that's going to win Defensive Player of the Year. I think they're more spread out talent wise, which is good, but not good for that award.
Comeback player of the year. There's some people who are interested in guys like Russell Wilson or Matt Stafford. My only quarrel is if DeMar Hamlin plays a full game, I think the award's wrapped up. I think this is Alex Smith 2.0. Do you think there's value in comeback player of the year for a guy like Matt Stafford if he comes back and plays at a high level? Or do you think there's no chance he can win this award?
I think that award's wrapped up.
It's DeMar Hamlin, right? He plays one game, they do a ceremony, and it's over. Hand him the award right now, right?
I don't want to comment because you might have to bleep it. I mean, the award in itself is strictly narrative street. The guy was he was up in a month. I don't know. Now I'm downplaying what happened.
Well, yeah, the hard part about betting that award is you have to root that he doesn't have the minimal amount of success that would be necessary to win it, and then you have to pick the player that's going to win it, conditional on DeMar Hamlin not winning it. And to me, that's just I'd rather do something else.
All right. I think we've done enough with this division. I really do appreciate everybody's time. This has been the NFC West preview right here on Forward Progress. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Please leave us a note telling us what you agreed and disagreed with today. This has been Forward Progress right here on the Hammer Betting Network.